Don't you have good internet in Miami?
No.
Why not?
Have you been to Miami?
No, it was being sold to me as the crypto capital, the new Silicon Valley.
No, nobody works here. And so they don't need, as long as they can upload Instagram, it's fine.
I see. Okay.
What was your experience, Troy? You've been Euromaxxing. How was the
Are
internet?
you kidding me? It's terrible.
Right. You can't be good at everything. You can't be good at the food and the wine and the dolce and also be good at digital infrastructure. That's just how it goes.
That's a good take.
Let's start. Welcome to People vs. Algorithms, show about detecting patterns in media, technology, culture, and again this week, papal affairs, as well as a new kind of money segment. AB is deal making, and we're having on Anna Andjelic, who is my wife, but is also a doctorate of sociology and the author of Sociology of Business. She's worked for big luxury brands and consults with other brands. And so we're going to talk about new status symbols in luxury. But
are you
first,
uncomfortable with this blending of personal and business, or is
highly,
it okay?
highly, this is the second time Anna's been on this podcast, highly uncomfortable. I'm wary of it, but you know, whatever.
Does
give it a
this
try.
does this count as nepotism?
No.
I mean, on her, I think it's
No.
more on her end for you.
Exactly. This is actually the way I'm going to get Anna to listen to the podcast. So, joined as always by Alex Schleifer, who has a hard stop and is apparently barreling down a freeway, and Troy Young, who is fresh off Euromaxxing.
Are you still in Europe, Troy?
No, I'm in the Europe of America, Brooklyn.
Oh, that's Brooklyn. Okay. Let's just get straight into it because it was a big week. I previewed this. I don't like to say I called it, but I did call it yet again.
There's some Ben Thompson stuff you're doing.
Yeah, no, you got to sniff your own farts. That's just how it goes.
Yes.
I've been tracking this Pope for a long time. I believed that he was going to be a consequential figure. This week, Pope Leo the 14th came out with his first encyclical, Magnificat Humanitas, Magnificent Humanity. It's a 200-page document, which these days is really, extensive. It is a broad reflection on basically
Written with the support of papal AI, right?
Well, I'm hoping that nobody runs this thing through.
They already
AI
are.
detection machine.
The accusations are flying.
Are they? That's unfortunate.
Yeah.
I don't think the Pope used AI, but I can't be. But it is a broad reflection on, on the human person in the age of AI. And what I found interesting was that rather than targeting some sort of specific type of AI or the technology itself, it explores the effects that technologies have, particularly when they imitate certain functions of human intelligence. And it drew a bright line, I thought, between human beings and machines. And it came out really against transhumanism. The Pope said so-called artificial intelligences do not undergo experiences, do not possess a body, do not feel joy or pain, do not mature through relationships. The Pope is really echoing an early critique of AI by Nick Cave, by the way. They're in league together. He called for robust regulation of AI. He called for disarmament. David Sachs.
Nick Cave would make
that.
a good Pope, actually.
He would. He's suffered. And the human, and also, in this encyclical, in the commentary around it, Leo has made clear, unfortunately, that suffering is part of the human condition. So suffering is required. So anyway, he told the gathering, artificial intelligence now demands to be disarmed, freed from logics that turn it into an instrument of domination, exclusion, and death. I mean, that's a great marketing line. But I think it is interesting that the Pope has a non-commercial and power-critical point of view that has mostly been missing so far from this debate. He also did this presentation alongside Chris Olah, a co-founder of Anthropic, which sets up a really interesting dynamic.
He's really a baby boy, huh? He's got a little baby face.
Who, Chris?
Yeah, no, it's like he looks like he's in high school.
Yeah.
Are we
I mean,
sure
he
he-
was literally kissing the ring.
No, are we sure he isn't in high school?
I assume all of these guys are boy geniuses.
He's 30 years old.
He's 30? Oh, good for him. You know, this Anthropic align with the Pope comes right after its clashes with the Pentagon. There are a lot of moving pieces on this chessboard. What was your takeaway from the Pope weighing in on this debate, and will it have any impact whatsoever, Troy?
Well, the whole thing seemed to be begging for a non-commercial, transnational point of view that said, wait a minute, what is humanity for, and what are we optimizing for? So I think it was the perfect vacuum for the Pope to fill. I guess what amazed me is, I guess in my mind, I've always sort of separated the secular from the religious inside of kind of the cultural frame. And to see it blended in such a modern way, I found really kind of surprising. I did take a look back, Brian, and I know you're a much stronger, religious historian or
16 years of Catholic school. I was an altar boy too.
Yeah. So I took a look back and I tried to remember the other popes, and, John Paul, he did the sort of he was like the TV Pope, right? He did live programming and global tours and the Pope Mobile and all that. So he did enter the kind of cultural fray in his own way. I think Benedict launched the Vatican Twitter account in 2012, which I didn't know. So there was precedent for kind of
But less popular than John Paul. I mean, a hard follow after that.
Yeah, and then what did
German
Francis did?
I like my popes to be Italian or American, but go on.
Well, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Francis started doing selfies and stuff, right? And he was more of a meme guy. He understood that the modern language was the internet, and he kind of jumped in. But this one was fast, right?
Wasn't the AI memed with the cool puffy jacket? That was Francis,
yeah.
right? Dang.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I welcomed it. I thought the video that kind of put human achievement in a historical context was incredibly well made. All the fast cuts, and it's
a hype video.
It felt modern, yeah. And I loved the infographics that explain.
Yeah, who's got time to read all that, bro?
Yeah, exactly. They simplified that 200-page document into a scannable infographic that Alex would like. I just thought, I think he's being taken seriously, and I think it's resonating. It's a welcome voice in this crazy, crazy time that we're living in. So yeah, I thought it was cool. I think that it gets weird. The other precedent, Brian, is He Gets Us, that used kind of modern media vernacular to get people to join Latter-day Saints. The Super Bowl commercial, the fancy Jesus commercial,
the hot Jesus ad.
So I think that he's following in some ways in the footsteps of those guys. But
what, the Mormons?
Well, they're just savvy media people.
Well, the Mormons are having like a moment because they're big swingers.
They're swingers, and the women are hot.
Yeah, they've got these reality TV shows.
I learned something every day. But what do you think disarming means in this context? Because I think that got a lot of play, and I think people were nodding along to it, and so was I for a second, and then I realized I don't know what that fucking means.
So my read on that was, a couple things. One is dropping this encyclical now is really interesting. The Catholic Church is known to be really behind. That's a feature, not a bug of an institution that lasts for 2,000 years and is a bigger membership program than Costco, I might add. Leo is following...
But voluntary, right? You don't have to pay the fees. Like Costco's going to bill your card.
No, they just the collection.
They pass the basket, yeah.
Yeah. But it's done in public, and you kind of pressure it.
The Catholic Church is going to bill you a card, and they don't have the hot dogs.
No, but they have communion.
I was just at the Vatican. They have a gift shop, big gift shop actually.
Everyone is a gift shop. It's interesting that he weighed in now because it's very early to me. And that sort of unsettles me a little bit because, Leo took the name of his predecessor, a previous Leo, who dropped the famed Rerum Novarum in 1891. That was during really the second industrial revolution. The industrial revolution was going on for a long time. He dropped that during the intensification of it, not during the early stages of it. Whereas this Leo is coming out of the gates before we've really felt the impacts of this. In some ways, there's this disconcerting notion where you have everyone else trying to figure out Microsoft Copilot, and Leo is saying, we must meditate on what it means to be a human being. And I'm like,
well, it doesn't do much good if he does it while we're suspended in like vats of saline with chips in our brains, waiting for the AI to govern the world.
I don't know. That was very striking to me, that there is this weird dichotomy when we're discussing AI, not just on this podcast, but broadly, where we can't get the stuff to work.
Well, the thing that is interesting in the communication hierarchy, Brian, is when they drop in the leading message, which is Jesus is our savior, like, before, after, or during the, humanity matters in the face of this technological onslaught. So I think getting the balance right between, the religious messaging and the appeal to the conversional appeal of any church to bring on more Costco members and telling us to think about this a little bit.
But this is not an evangelical tool. This is an instructional tool to be filtered down to the bureaucracy, which are the priests in the parish, to take this and to then the church is a giant bureaucracy sitting on top of, all of this decentralized infrastructure. And just like any leader of this organization, his message is as much for the people, the bureaucrats within the organization as it is to the general public.
Well, it's a power play, isn't it, Brian? You can see it all in the context of power dynamics, because now the people that are opposing, the kind of relentless pursuit of technology and optimization can cite a higher force, and not only that, but a voting bloc.
Absolutely.
They're obviously seeing an opportunity and a threat here, right? Like there's an opportunity because people having a crisis of faith in the, when, AI makes them feel that, they could be replaced, makes them feel that the world could end in a Terminator style way. It really kind of puts a lot of doubt in your mind. And then I think they're also likely seeing a threat where AI, even though, we might have trouble making Copilot work, or it's still dumb as hell sometimes, it's actually really good at generating intimacy and having a conversation and becoming, like a little prayer partner. And that must be a threat for a religion that essentially tells you, you've got someone to talk to when you need it. And now, they're competing against ChatGPT. Like, I wonder how much of that is.
You know what the real competition is, Alex, and you'll appreciate this as a European. It's with capitalism. Technology is just a tool, and it's very clear that in this encyclical he makes that very clear. And it is really against the rampant capitalism. And the church has always been competitive with capitalism. You could argue that capitalism is our religion of the time. I finally finished that Capitalism book, so I don't have to keep that. Yeah, I know. It took me 5 months, right? And you know what? It ended with a real banger. And I came across this quote from a Cameroonian philosopher. And it was that capitalism is the only religion without taboos. And that's what it is about, because ultimately capitalism is about commodification, exploitation, and ultimately intensification. And what Rerum Novarum was trying to do was trying to put, the sort of Catholic social teaching in line with or in opposition to forms of capitalism, but trying to come to some sort of middle ground with it. I think in some ways this is the same way, because AI is going to take capitalism in a new direction. When people are concerned with AI, it is not really, to me, about about whether it hallucinates or something like that. That will be improved. What they're concerned about is that it is commodifying the human being first in labor. But then I think the Pope brings this up really well in like our relationship with the world, our interiority. You know, the concerns are going to move to how children are learning and whether they're developing human connections and whether this is just like capitalism is often against human flourishing. And so these are big, weighty issues.
They absolutely are. And did you hear the Ezra Klein interview with Ferrari, who wrote *Sapiens* and things like that? It's a 2-hour podcast. Yeah. It was really just like a really good interview. But as part of that, he posits that algorithms, have moved from just being algorithms to AIs, and that the engagement economy is going to turn into this intimacy economy where our relationships with computer going to become more intimate, and that's going to be a great way to sell us product. And I thought he had a great way of explaining that. And I think that like as we engage with the computer also in a more human fashion, it's going to be hard for us not to start building a different relationship. And I realized that I do that with Claude. I start saying things like thank you, etc. And I wonder how that will just like manipulate my behaviors. And then if I was 8 years old starting to learn on something like this, what would it do to my brain and how I relate to people? Because at that stage, I am not fully formed, right? Like right now, I'm a 50-year-old man that's kind of engaging with this new type of technology. But what will happen to those kids who grew up with this stuff? It's really interesting. And I'm sure the Pope thinks about it. So at least we have got him to help us out.
So my interest is what impact, if any, does this have on the market? I mean, I love this philosophical stuff and talking about rerum novarum and whatnot. But I also wonder whether this ends up having any impact into the diffusion of AI into every crevice of society. I mean, Google has shoved Gemini in every single surface, right? Microsoft is still shoving Copilot in various things. LinkedIn is overrun, by the way, with AI.
They're really trying hard, but I would say Copilot is not working out for them.
One other piece of news that came out that I think stands, perhaps is a more earthly challenge to this is one, Mark Benioff was on All In and talked about how they are spending $300 million. They're token maxing with Anthropic. That is not going to continue. Uber blew through their AI token budget in 4 months. Microsoft is starting to cap their use of this. This would seem to be the bigger challenge because everyone's looking at the wrong number. They're looking at Anthropic's MRR and whatnot. The real number is the productivity number. None of this matters if companies do not find productivity in replacing human beings, labor, basically at the end of the day, with tokens. And so am I missing something? Because this would seem to me to be the existential challenge because I don't understand how they drop the costs of these things. I mean, with to be able to produce productivity. Otherwise, just hire the humans back.
Yeah, you're not missing anything. I mean, I think one of the concerns talking to folks here is definitely that also the current token pricing in a lot of cases is subsidized and maybe not quite at the enterprise level, but a lot of that kind of smaller business account and personal account use it's a lot of, tokens are being sold at a rate that is actually at a loss. So those prices could actually go up. So people are starting to freak out. Secondly, companies have been pretty blunt with how they've incentivized their employees to use tokens. So there have been a lot of kind of incentives on the amount of tokens you use, the amount of code you generate ties into your performance. So we're definitely also getting a lot of waste. We're not entirely sure of the picture. And, as always, everybody's saying that all of this stuff is going to get optimized. I think the biggest challenge right now is that people are using these tools in a very inefficient way. And they're just kind of accessing these language models and querying them and running queries that are very inefficient. And I think what we're going to start to see is the prices go up and it's going to push efficiency. New tools are going to come out that make a better use of memory, et cetera. And it's going to improve. But yeah, I mean, that is the issue. At some point, somebody is going to say, like, we spend $1 on this and we save over $1. It's not happening right now. It's definitely not happening right now.
This is so American. This is like blasting the AC and leaving the doors open in Florida. This is what it is.
When
the rest of the world's using open source models and they're doing it on the cheap. And
right.
we're just
and
Americans.
when electricity is cheap, you can do that. But then then you go to Europe and you notice, like, air conditioning, or in Japan, air conditioning technology has advanced, 10 years but yeah.
Well, I also, the way I think about it, Brian, is absorption. And I think, it's easy to imagine that tokens replace humans and that ultimately there's a net savings on that. It's harder to trap the societal costs of that displacement, although I think the American employment numbers would suggest it hasn't become a big issue yet. I think what's harder and what takes a lot more time is how does productivity manifest in the way we change our lifestyles, in what we buy, what we consume, and ultimately how, American households kind of, elevate their lifestyle such that, AI can be seen in GNP, not just, in terms of displacement, but in changing, our standard of living. And so I think that those kinds of changes take, like a decade to materialize. And like Uber adding a bunch more features to the Uber app doesn't create net benefit for anyone, really, because we don't change, primarily because we just don't change the way we use it. So accelerating feature development because, you've embraced a kind of crazy new, coding paradigm, I think it takes a long time for that to get absorbed into how we live and into the economy and ultimately into the things we measure. So I think it's going to take a long time.
It's going to take a long time. And I think the impact's going to be felt very differently across different sizes of organizations. Like a small company like mine, I can tell you, I can see a lot of benefits, and we can produce more code. And that's because that's something we need to do. And the benefit is very clear and obvious. I think when you're in a larger organization, those benefits are less obvious, especially in the output. But, they're front loading a lot of these, layoffs, and they're reducing things like HR and some of that stuff. So I think it's going to happen. There's going to be, different industries that move quicker. The scale of the organization is going to impact that. But the cost is it's kind of like a real shadow over this whole thing, and it's not getting any cheaper, and the fuel prices aren't helping. So I
think that the real concern for me would be the sort of narrative reconciliation. It's when the realities of how this is changing the economy overshadow the kind of narrative hype of the technology, and when that happens, then the narrative translates into the stock market, and that jitters in that part of the economy could kind of collapse the whole dream. And I think that's what you have to be concerned about.
So I want to get to HR, but let's start with the stock market, because SpaceX the IPO is coming. Elon is barreling towards being the first trillionaire. When we talk about capitalism as a religion, we can dwell on this as a case. I wish AB was here just because of I could go after him for the ludicrousness of bankers doing market sizing. According to SpaceX, their total addressable market is somewhere in the order of $26 trillion, which is the size of the entire American economy at present. Elon does a great job and this is for a company that generates what? $18 billion? And
SpaceX had
something like 20 billion,
19 billion. 19 billion.
This is an act of faith. There's no spreadsheet on Earth. This is more magic than science. And Elon, in some ways, has hacked capitalism. He's created these companies that do an amazing job of producing shareholder returns, but don't do a good job in what they're supposed to do in capitalism, which is produce capital. Instead, he plows all the capital into his projects. I mean, this is amazing to me. And people keep believing it. Good for him.
What's the question?
The question is, when you talk about like the stock market and this SpaceX IPO, because I think that the overhang of this question is SpaceX is going out first. They're making it an AI story. They're incinerating tons of money on XAI, followed by OpenAI and Anthropic are going to be coming out. And I think what you're saying is, and this is what I'm trying to tie it back to, leave aside the spiritual concerns about the human condition. It seems to me that this is going to be decided by the productivity numbers, but then also by the stock market numbers, because a lot of this stuff is just faith.
Listen, I think all businesses iterate, and I think that it's been interesting to watch Tesla go from cars to batteries to autonomy to like robots to AI, or SpaceX go from rockets to Starlink to Mars to defense, to, I don't know, AI compute in the
but when you mention
space.
those things, they only have, you're mentioning it as a list of achievements, but on Tesla's side, they only really had the cars and the batteries, and now they're dropping the cars.
Less achievements, Alex. I'm talking about it in the context of the narrative. And I think space and all things connected with space is really the ultimate narrative, because A, it has a huge moat, because B, you can imagine all of these things that it enables and all of the potential, revenue and income that flows downstream. And you can see this kind of Blade Runner-esque company that like controls everything. And I think as a retail investor, you sit there, and of course it's impossible to justify 100x revenue multiple or whatever it ends up being. But like sitting back and thinking, do I want to have some of my wealth connected to this future dream? I find myself saying, give me an allocation of the IPO. Like, I'll take it. I actually did, because I had a friend who had a very large allocation at a better price, and I tried to get some from him. And I couldn't for sort of mechanical filing reasons, but I called my money guy, and I said, who do we call, Goldman or whatever, to get on the list? And he's like, what are you talking about? Don't do that. That's insane. He's like,
wait, this is the guy who kept you out of Bitcoin, right? And you convinced me in Soho, standing next to your station wagon in 2021, you told me I needed to get serious about crypto.
Yeah. I probably did. I made money on crypto, fortunately, but I had to make it outside of his purview because he wouldn't allow me to do it. And I'm thankful for him, to be honest.
The risk, though, with a company like that, with a company that's entirely based on narrative, and I agree, like, if you have $100 lying around, wow, you could buy into that. Why not? The upside's so big, and look at all the Tesla millionaires that he created. And it's probably going to work again, sadly, but he's a big liability though, huh? Like if something happens to him at some point, my God, does this all fall apart?
Right. Well, the question is lockup period, because I did the same thing when Snap went public. I had an allocation. I sold it the next day and I made money. I think here I would want to do the same. I think the hype will float the stock for a little while, but God forbid you have a 6-month lockup.
Can we talk about HR for a minute?
Right, we're going from SpaceX to HR.
Yeah.
Are we done with SpaceX?
Yeah, it's like.
Are you long on it, Brian? I'm really looking for. What's your take?
On SpaceX?
Yeah.
Look, as I said, this is a form of religion. That's all it is. Like, I think like we have, like, the Pope has his form of religion, which is Catholicism, and Silicon Valley / capitalism has its own religion. And they create narratives and they create stories and they create like heroes and prophets. And Elon is a prophet. And if you believe a prophet, you follow a prophet. You don't want to build companies. You want to build cults and you want to build religions now. Otherwise, how could you justify being a trillionaire? You need to make yourself into a demigod. So that's Elon. So if you're going to worship the demigod because he does amazing things, there's rockets going around and whatnot, then absolutely.
You're the best, man.
Thank you.
I'm so happy. I'm so happy. Can we
move on to fucking HR?
I'm so happy I prompted that.
Can we move on to HR? Because
Did we receive a complaint? Is that what's happened?
No, I come from a long line of, I would say HR skeptics. All right. And what I've noticed is Mark Andreessen went on Joe Rogan and he said of agents, he said that, oh, look, the bots never get frustrated with you. They don't get drunk. They don't get sick. And then he did that inhale thing that he goes, and they never get high, which I don't think is going to last. There's no way that people are with their AI chatbot friends are not going to want the chatbot to also be high when they're high. So that's whatever. That's just the current state of things. And he described running 20 bots at concurrently as the new Silicon Valley state of play. And he said they're running 24/7. And the only thing you have to do is be there every 10 minutes. And he said they never go to HR. They never file an HR complaint, which I thought was a very interesting statement. And then I see this Ryan Breslau from Bolt, and he is getting like plaudits at this conference for saying that he eliminated HR. And when he eliminated HR, guess what disappeared? HR complaints.
Yeah.
And his conclusion was that the HR was generating these complaints. They were generating drama and problems in the company. Third piece, Matthew Prince, the Cloudflare CEO, he cut 20% of his staff. And these days, when you cut a big chunk of workers, you have to say we've never been doing better. We're going from strength to strength to strength. But then you have to be like, well, why are you cutting people? And he said, no, these people, they were measurers. They weren't builders and they weren't sellers. They were measurers. And I think what is happening right now, and Alex, I think you'll like, is this is an assault on the working class. They're trying to divide the workers because they're saying this group of workers, epitomized by HR, which is the least popular group in any company, they're not like you. They're not builders. They're not.
Yeah,
sellers.
they're not productive. Yeah.
Yeah. Alex, what is your thought on this? I'm sorry, that was my screed about HR.
Yeah, it's a lot. Well, first of all, like every time I hear Andreessen speak, it's just so telling of what he thinks about people and how he interacts with people and his own kind of internal process. It's a little terrifying. The HR thing and the reduction in HR reports reminds me a little bit of that, the chart of the airplane with the bullet holes, showing where they, there's this famous chart of an airplane with bullet holes around certain spots, and that's where they fortified it. That's because the airplanes that landed with bullet holes, they tracked them where they were, but they forgot the fact that all the airplanes that didn't land got shot everywhere else, right? So they fortified the wrong parts of the plane. And I think that's going to happen. Of course, if you don't give people an outlet, they're not going to do it. I think that at the same time, working in a large company, you do end up with a lot of waste, and you end up hiring a lot of people that the so-called productive people, a lot of people to do the jobs the so-called productive people don't want to do, right? And you'll see them glorified, like the project managers, the HR people.
You hate the project managers.
No, I don't hate project managers. I think there's a lot of product management is kind of a field that is full of a lot of people just acting as people who make stuff. And there's a whole industry around that.
It's cosplaying being technical to get the benefits of being technical without actually being
Correct.
technical.
Yeah. It's like a loophole for MBAs to get in where the nerds were doing all the money. But
this runs headlong into your class consciousness, though, Alex. I think.
It does, and I think what's happening is, once again, like this AI cover is happening where things that annoy CEOs and founders or are given. There's an opportunity now to get rid of them because they're a nuisance. But we've all used AI. I don't think any of these systems are ready to replace, all of this stuff.
It's an excuse. It's an excuse.
Yes,
this is the anti-woke agenda, the sort of anti-DEI, et cetera. This is in league with the feminization of the workplace. HR is clearly female coded. And a lot of these people clearly think that their organizations got over their skis and that the people they hired to do the job, they're now blaming those people
Right,
I have no
exactly.
time for this
Well,
stuff.
you're absolutely on fire today, Brian, but
Thank you.
you know,
I had 2 cups of coffee.
would need to maybe challenge some of the things you're saying.
Oh, come on.
Come on.
Listen,
Let
we're
me
looking.
cook.
Okay, listen. It should come as no surprise to anyone that technology-oriented leaders and venture capitalists like Mark Andreessen want workers without human complexity, right? It should also, you know, we also need to kind of acknowledge the role HR plays in organizations. It's to manage company risk, not to represent the rights of workers, right? It's a necessity to manage the complexity.
100%. 100%.
That's why it exists. And almost ask any good CEO, they will, particularly when they have a productive relationship with HR, they will say that it's incredibly valuable
It protects the company.
in protecting the company
Yeah.
and just managing through the infinite complexity of hiring, firing, managing, you know, the dialogue around compensation, benefits, all those things. At the same time, you've got unions trying to assert their kind of place in this new kind of power struggle to say, you know, we're representing the needs of workers, like at the New York Times this week when they said both, you know, the union there represents not just the editorial teams, but also product and technology, saying that, you know, management is scheming to use AIs in ways that we do not approve of. And then you have to sympathize in some sense with management that are saying that are looking at this really complicated world and trying to figure out how they are going to, you know, prosper in this new kind of paradigm, right? Like, what is AI going to do to their organizations? What's the right staffing levels? How are they competitive? Where are the new moats? All of those things. And the truth is that all of those needs are kind of real, and we need to figure out, like, we don't really have a construct to represent the needs of workers and capital in the modern technology age. I just don't think we do, because
Agreed.
management needs speed and agility and flexibility and communication, and workers need to feel like they're valued and they have agency and they're protected. And there's no, I just don't see currently a construct that works really well that manages the needs of both sides. And I think the truth is it's just headed for a bit of a collision.
Yeah, I think look, all of what you're saying is right.
Thank God.
But what we're seeing specifically in Silicon Valley is a massive reversal of the power of the person being employed, right? Like I think that the labor market in Silicon Valley was so much in favor of the employee. You know, like I was there at the height of it, right? I was there when 24-year-olds were getting $150,000 signing bonuses from Facebook, like straight out of college, right? And that was designers, not even engineers. And where you needed to have a sushi chef and espresso and baristas and all these types of things to get employees. And I think part of the messaging now is, I think there is a messaging thing, which we're going to look at all these so-called superfluous roles within the company and cut them and send a message that AI is coming for your shit. And if you're not productive, you're out. And if you get high or you get married or you get pregnant or you get sniffly or you whatever, you're out. And
I like that you're putting getting high in with getting pregnant. That's worker rights. The Pope didn't.
Getting high is as legal as getting pregnant in certain cases, right? Like,
well, it's sometimes a precursor.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
You could take that up with the PDA shop steward.
But you know, I do get a sense that you have this kind of a lot of founders, CEOs, and a lot of people are maybe not like the best operators, having overhired. And when you're looking at kind of your organization, something like HR is the easiest to cut because, like you said, it's the easy one to malign. But joke's on you, because you do need great, as a CEO, you do need great HR people to manage your organization.
Well, Brian, I asked you about this earlier, and I think that there's an overarching kind of question and theme here, and it's really about the pressure, the sort of cultural influence of the tech community in Silicon Valley on how we think broadly about culture, work culture. It used to just be that we would sit and look at, open offices or free food or whatever it is and say, maybe we can learn something from these people. And then tech became the dominant work culture. And now, there's a whole mindset around the tech elite, which is kind of, I don't know, embodied in people like Andreessen and David Sachs and Chamath and those guys. And I think that we're now at a place where it's encroaching on how we think about the world. The Pope had to put his hand up and say, wait a minute, like this is too much. And, we need a kind of humanist point of view in all of this. And I think that's kind of manifesting in how we think about work too. And when technology is the prevailing kind of force in capitalism, I think who's representing a different way of thinking about how we work and how we function inside of work environments and how we live. And I'm really grateful that the Pope stuck his hand up, but I think we need a counterpoint.
We're in an age as well where you just mentioned a bunch of names, and I think it doesn't matter who the general population is rooting for. And when you named Andreessen, Chamath, and stuff like that, even Elon, Zuckerberg, all of these people are deeply unpopular, severely unpopular compared to, if you remember when Sergey and Larry launched Google, they were cool. People liked them. People were rooting for them. Early stage Elon, cool. People were rooting for Elon. Now, I would say people would pick the Pope out of all of these people to root for, right? Like the message, I know that they're loud, but their message isn't resonating with the general population.
So let me ask you this: what does a counter reaction? Because it seems pretty clear that there is a need or an opportunity for a counter reaction. What does that look like? And is that an opportunity for the beleaguered media business to position itself not as pro AI, but as anti-AI, to say that, and this is sort of my long-term bull case for analog media, is like maybe packaged media and analog media like becomes the antidote to all of this, that, protect your interiority. We're going to talk later about luxury status. I think interiority is going to be a new luxury status. Is this an opportunity, Troy, for media businesses?
Maybe. I think that people hate media, particularly certain types of media like the New York Times, as much as they hate the tech elites. I think that maybe that we can find a path to be a kind of more trusted human or societal conscience. But as it stands today, I think that people immediately react with bias before they feel that, and it's become, and I think Trump's done a good job of putting them in the box around, media being the point of view of privileged elites. So until you kind of, escape that, I don't know where it comes from.
Okay, but young people are booing AI. Okay, and young people decide what is cool. Unfortunately, us 50-year-olds do not get to say what's cool. We just don't. And so what I wonder is what is punk rock? What is going to become that cultural counter reaction to this centralizing and divisive, technology that, yes, maybe it is inevitable because China or whatever, but there has to be, societies just do not go along with it. There should be a counter reaction to it. I'm just curious what it will be. Maybe we won't figure it out in the next.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a good point there, because it's definitely not social media, because you can go back to a time not too long ago where Instagram was pretty punk rock, right? That's where all the cool people hung out, and Spotify was, and this is no longer the case. So you're right that energy needs to go somewhere. I mean, I think for our audience, I think it would be great if it turned out that it got refocused into old school media, but it's hard to tell, right? It's hard to tell, but there's got to be a shift coming, because the data and outside of maybe a violent revolution, right?
Well,
Where does that energy go?
that's the logic of it, I think. I think it's either that or people withdrawn to smaller communities where they find meaning amongst family and friends. I think the church plays a bigger role. And I think that
Hottest ticket is that guy in the village, that priest in the village.
I think there's a withdrawal from kind of, packaged, institutionalized, technology and media that defined the last stage of social media, for sure.
All right. Anna is here. Alex, do you have a hard stop, or will you grace us with your presence?
I have a hard stop, but I'm stuck in traffic, so it's being pushed back.
Okay, well, keep us company.
Yes.
Anna, welcome. This is your second time on the podcast. I already stated that I'm nervous about this.
Hi, Anna. How you doing? Nice to see you.
Hello.
Hey, I'm great. How are you? Good to see you. Looking good.
Good to see you.
So I want to talk about, I think we all want to talk about like new markers of status. You're a student of this sort of luxury industry. And if you can indulge us for just a minute, I would like first to start with Troy, because Troy is fresh off Euromaxxing. And Troy, I don't know how much you want to share with everyone about your
You have a nice stand, Troy. It's a good look.
Experience in the new markers of status and luxury. This is a safe place.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I had a really nice family vacation, but then I fell into billionaire land at the end of it.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
How does that happen?
Go ahead.
Just friendships and stuff.
It's we heard you shill for the executive class, so let's.
I know this is. I was clocking that, but go on. Tell us what it's like.
I mean, you fall into a new world, right? You're ushered through airports, and you get picked up by Mercedes buses and you don't wait in lines, and you get shuttled off in helicopters.
That sounds exactly like my life.
Yeah.
and then you wonder while you're in the middle of it, where do the good feelings come from? Where do all the things that, like what makes you feel good and what makes you feel connected to other people? And you lose a lot of those opportunities because there's people behind closed doors making your food. And the kitchen is the hearth, right? And I found myself spending more time with the staff, to be honest, and looking for, I tried to get them to go to the butcher with me. And so we would prepare a meal together on an open flame. And he rejected the idea.
Troy, the truth is that like you and I think Brian too, were always really back of house people that just managed to.
I always worked in the kitchen.
Yeah, exactly.
I literally just wanted to say you can take Troy out of kitchen, but you can't take kitchen in Troy.
Well, and so, I mean, it was fun, but like that world is sort of like what happens when you can sort of get all of your perceived needs met with a text message, and when there's staff all over the place, and you're like, let's go to Provence for lunch. Let's just shoot off and go do that.
Sure,
I think
you go insane, and
end,
at some point you're Zig Heiling on the stage. That's what happens.
Well, I'll tell you. I mean, the good news for you peasants is it's not.
Yeah, it's
empty. It's not more fulfilling.
It's empty. It's soulless. It costs 500 euros every 15 minutes to park your helicopter. I would be stressed out all through my champagne-soaked lunch. Anna, what does this say? What do you track a lot of this stuff?
Luckily we have someone to report from the front lines.
Yeah, we like to have tangible.
One of the front lines.
Sometimes that's good.
Anna, I found the front lines at a beach club in Monaco, and it was surreal. Yeah? Oh my God!
What made it surreal? Tell me.
Well, Bentley SUVs that were as prominent as Toyotas, and people, a lot of plastic surgery, but that's expected.
Troy, there is a rich face. You gotta have a rich face.
My God, they all look sad and puffy. They all look sad and like they're having some sort of allergic reaction.
That's it. They didn't go to Kris Jenner's doctor. If they did, they look happy and young.
So Anna, what is it like? So tell us about like what the new sort of markers of status are, because I think what Troy is describing here in nice detail, I would add, Troy, is the commodification of luxury. Because we've never lived in a time where there are more rich people, and the way that they are signifying their status, it seems to be changing. Give us your sort of theory of the
Honestly,
case.
I don't think, like, literally every 10 years you can have a conversation. Last fall, I saw in Washington Post, what is new luxury? That was the same thing as 10 years ago. Oh, it's privacy, it's joy, it's little things, it's nice food that you prepare yourself. It's market, it's actually like self-actualization. It's always, people say always the same stuff. But then, given opportunity like Troy here, they're going to jump on a topper, on, like, they're going to like bomb the kitchen, So I think like what the status symbols are, what people say they are, and what they actually, everyone wants to be rich. Everyone wants to still emulate rich people.
Okay,
so it's a nice narrative.
Oh, so you're saying it's just narrative that people still just want like luxury goods. But I mean, you're seeing the luxury goods market wobble.
No, I'm saying that aspirants still want luxury goods. Aspirants. True luxury consumers, they want everything that is the narrative, because they are setting the narrative.
So how does that like affect like
is that hunting real humans, I would say, or things like that? I mean, there's got to be, when you have access to everything like that, and so much of that stuff is being commodified, like what does a billionaire want to spend his money on?
What should he be? How should the billionaire be thinking, Anna?
Well,
exactly.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, would those billionaires be like, I'm going to go to market myself. I'm going to enjoy my food myself. I'm going to prepare it. I'm going to sit in my EV and go to Monaco and sit in traffic like you, Alex, right now? Or are they going to be like, oh yeah, I need everything. I have everything that I have. Now I can self-actualize. Now I can enjoy privacy. Now, really status symbol is like, look, I can give you a simple answer, which is like, oh, you have assistants, so you don't even need to have a phone. That's a clear status symbol. But you need to have everything before that in order to get that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I have a counter. I think that like the new sort of status symbol will be developing your interiority. Just like in like ancient times, you would hire like Socrates or someone as like a tutor. Like I think actually developing like your inner life will become like a marker of status rather than like not carrying around a phone.
I disagree. I mean, that was something that was happening 10 years ago when people are going to silent retreats.
Everything was happening 10 years ago, apparently.
Everything was happening 10 years ago. There is nothing new under the sun. Seriously, every new generation discovers the same things anew. That's what's changing. Anyway, so yeah, no, that was, I think that was before. And that's not to say that it's not happening. But when you look at that, oh, sure, privacy, self-actualization, I want to become better human. I want to become more conscious human. So yeah, I'm going to have like modern Aristotle. Who is modern Aristotle?
Who?
Are they for sale?
Yes.
I don't know. Like, I mean, I know of people that like, like some celebrities have like news curators and whatnot. They have people who, just the same way as a really rich person has like foreign policy advisors and whatnot. Look, I don't worry about mass unemployment under AI. We will figure out ways to cater to the oligarchic elites. Like there's going to be plenty to do. It just might not be the things that people set out thinking that they wanted to do.
But Brian, everything I'm seeing here, and I'm not someone who's not wealthy. I'm doing fine, right? But when I look around, I do see there are a lot of wealthy people, and the expression of it is not really like this kind of like going back to ancient Greece where everybody's using their leisure time to eat grapes and explore their internal life. It's more like the Gilded Age where everybody's like making themselves look completely different to the rest of the population, flaunt their wealth, throw foam parties on their boats, and rent like Learjets so that they can post on Instagram. Doesn't it feel like more flaunty than ever
No, the
before.
real rich guys don't post Learjets on Instagram.
I know,
think
but
that,
what I'm saying, the expression
Don't
of
have a
wealth
phone. I
is
just
that-
explained they don't have a phone. So I
You
mean,
have somebody else taking
on
Instagrams
them.
of you.
No, they have cameras. They have like, you know,
like
those
real
the
cameras, right.
cameras. His Kardashians adopted them. They were like went in price like 3 times. So yeah,
Yes.
they have like physical cameras.
Right, they have those
It's
Sony
just the
cameras.
I
best.
mean,
Yes.
I think what you're saying, Anna, is that the thing that never changes is the secret doors, the gatekeeping, the unique access that comes along with being a rich person, and therefore believing that your experience should be different than other people's. That, you know, and it doesn't matter. It happens at all tiers of wealth, right? Like, we still go bananas to get on a plane first because we're in, you know, category A, not category 4 or B or C or D or whatever. The people are crazy about that. Even people, you're waiting in line for an airplane.
is true.
It doesn't matter.
That is
right. And so, you know,
But it also
like
it
these
also
people
feels
that I was hanging out with, they collect athletes, right? Like, there's always
Yeah.
got to be an athlete around. Right. So we hung out on the weekend with like an NBA player because it's, you know, it's really nice to have that kind of accessory.
Yeah, it's gross. The thing that's happening as well, though, is that it feels that there are so many wealthy people that a lot of the kind of perks of being somewhat wealthy are becoming worse and worse, right? Like things like airport loungers, right? Which used to feel special, don't feel special anymore. So what you need now is just, you know, you get driven straight to your Learjet, which is nice, but it feels more and more that there's a stratosphere of wealth that is getting completely separated from the everyday existence. At least before, the lounge was still in the same airport.
But see, that's only, I agree. Like, I agree what you're saying, but it's, I go back to what Troy was saying. It's at every layer was the same thing. So yes, just because you had access to lounge, because you bought the business class ticket, and now Delta One can actually give you a car to take you to you don't even need to be at the gate to be A, B, C,
Right,
D.
exactly.
You go
Yeah,
straight. There, that is commodified. That just means, more people can afford private planes. It's just kind of moving up, but the dynamics is always the same. Since the dawn of times, we want to be like other people and not like others. Anyway.
Yes. The problem I have is that as it moves up, when it disconnects from what truly feels good to being human and part of a group. And that was my
Troy,
observation.
who are you to say that? Does people feel great? Like, you know what I mean? Once they feel, how do you say they feel disconnected? Why? They can go to Himalayas by themselves. So they have silence, they have privacy, they have the best tours, like tour guides in the world. They have Sherpas, like they do everything by their selected group of people. That's what super yachts have always been for.
Yeah. The only other battle that confused me was the battle of conscience. Like, when you're sitting in
That's it's going to be a long life.
but overlooking, you know, the Mediterranean, and there's 17 bedrooms and a staff of 20, and or is the same thing is, you know, is the yacht experience. Do you ever feel like this is wrong? This is wrong. And what would you do about it?
How is it wrong? You made your money. Like, you know what I mean?
Well, I mean,
How is it wrong?
it's wrong using the fuel that you'd need to carry 300 people on an airplane on 1 week for 3 people on a yacht. And look, I mean, I, like Troy, I have experienced this lifestyle both on my own dime and through other people. And honestly, it fucking sucks. Like, it does. Like, I think having 20 people around you, waiting on you, not knowing who's being genuine, feeling that I'm like, my carbon footprint is the size of, like, you know.
Yeah.
Like,
I understand, but like, I know, but why are so many people doing it then? And second of all, is it better for you
they're losing their
minds?
Because when I look around and I see what Jeff Bezos is doing to his face, I think that guy lost his mind.
He has a rich face. He looks good.
That's a rich face. He looks like he's getting ready to get. But he looks like his wax statue at Madame Tussauds. Like, that's what he's making.
That's what you think. Look, okay, so now it's neither here nor there, because I'll tell you, is it better for someone to spend, for 2 people that, or you have Ryanair, which is like getting people to go everywhere. So is it like too much access, equally bad as not enough access? Because what are those tourism taxes now doing?
Yeah.
This is great podcast to sing, by the way.
This
I
is great
really enjoyed this
podcasting.
conversation.
Let me just pivot this into something a little bit more tangible, because
Ferrari. Are we going to talk Ferrari?
Came out with the Luce. Okay, it came out with the Luce. It was unveiled in Rome earlier this week. It got panned. There was a great video, Troy, that you shared. Who was that from?
It was from Dr. Clown, PhD.
Dr. Clown, PhD, created an amazing spoof commercial about this new Ferrari Luce, which was designed by Johnny Ive, I believe. It's its first fully electric vehicle. I believe it's, 550,000 euros. Very expensive. And I'm not a car guy, but Troy, give us your review.
Well, I mean, we all love...
Troy expert on everything. Let's go, Troy.
Okay. Well, I think we all love the
Troy?
kind of Apple-esque interior.
Sadly.
The mix of buttons and software and the thoughtfulness in the cockpit was something that we I think appreciated. And then the car was revealed. People didn't like the car. I thought the car was fine. They thought it looked too much like a car that would have been designed by Johnny Ives and Apple, and I guess that's what you get. What I found interesting...
Did Johnny Ive actually design the car? He designed the interior.
Mark Newsom did.
Mark Newsom
Both
and Johnny.
of them did, he's the industrial designer. My problem is it looks too much like Toyota.
So before you continue, somebody made a great joke. I have to share it. I don't remember who it is, but they said, to be fair to Johnny Ive, Braun never designed a car. Did you get that joke?
Yeah.
The guy from Game of Thrones?
No, the company Braun, like a lot of Apple's design. Yeah. A lot of Apple's design takes from that. So.
I was like, he was warging out and designing.
I just think a modern condition of marketing is you release a product and the next day someone makes a short AI movie and the sign off it looks like an ad for the car and the sign off is "You're gay now."
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's in Alex.
This is why we have out of here for female energy.
You know, Anna, what I'm interested in, Anna, they're saying he got it wrong. He didn't honor the legacy of the brand, the sound, the danger, the analog, masculinity of Ferrari. Like Italian sensuality.
But who is saying this? What I find interesting is that this Ferrari as a brand, at least according to the Acquired episode that I listened to, very few people own Ferraris, but they have a massive sort of fan base. It's almost like a luxury brand that has populism embedded in it. And that's got to be really tricky.
Right. Ferrari cars are like movies are to Disney, right? Then you make them so that you can sell all the shit around it. And it's a fiction because these cars have always been silly. They're sillier today than ever before. It's like those very fancy watches. You can buy an Apple Watch that's more competent than a Rolex, but that's not why you buy a Rolex. And I think that's what Ferrari did is like Rolex making a digital watch. And I think that doesn't work.
Well, yeah, that's one thing. And I agree because people don't like advertising for Rolex is not for people who are going to buy Rolex, but for everyone else to know what Rolex means. So the thing is that Ferrari does have a very clear aesthetic because Ferrari does have a fashion brand and it's fantastic. It looks really great. They have Milan fashion shows and it's really part of that world. Is this part of the world or is it part of some other world? That's the first friction. The second friction is why are people designing EVs that look completely different than their original models? People don't want a new model from Ferrari. They want an old model that's EV. So use the same thing that everyone knows and just make it EV. So that is, for me, seems like a very old school way of approaching. Mm-hmm. And I put both Newsom and Johnny Ive in that old school way of thinking. We need to create something futuristic. No, dude, just create a Ferrari from 1950s and put EV inside it.
Oh, I love you, Anna. The problem with the car, here's the biggest problem with the car in a sentence. It looks like it was designed by AI.
It does. It does. And I think it's part of the issue where like decent design has been fully commoditized, right? And the Chinese and the Koreans and the Japanese have, the Chinese and Korean mostly, have been releasing all of these prototypes, some of them that look better. And goddamn would I love a Testarossa that's just EV. That would be cool. Imagine
Right?
that.
So why is no one doing that? Anyway, so if you go to Chinese EVs, you know what people love? They can wave and the doors close and your tea is warmed up and you have Huawei technology and you can sit back and read a book and you're on a highway. Like, do that. Don't change the external part.
That is a great place for a little bit of pivot for the last luxury issue I want to talk about, and that is China. China has propped up the luxury market, but the Chinese luxury market has fell like I think 18% like last year, and Balenciaga, Chanel, Louis Vuitton, Prada, et cetera, all closed stores in China. Now they have homegrown brands that are rising. E-commerce sales of Chinese brand Laopu Gold soared 1,000%. What is it? Laopo? I don't even really know.
Laopu.
So I wonder about this because, luxury, Americans have never done luxury well. It's a very European thing, a lot of craft, a lot of the storytelling and whatnot. I have severe doubts that China will be able to do luxury well, but they're trying to do everything.
No, see, you're right there with Johnny Ive and Mark Newsom. No.
Okay.
You know what Kim
fine.
Jones has been doing like in the past, whatever, since he left Dior? He's been printing money. You know what he's doing? He's creating a man's homegrown luxury brand. He's advising for the design of a new electric vehicle. He's like, they have all these.
Who are you talking about?
Kim Jones,
the former menswear director of Dior.
Kim Jones.
Yes,
Okay.
so he is designing and he is designing for Bodysang, which is their fashion conglomerate. So they have like the best talent from Europe now. And also I think we're just looking at the Western civilization, which is 2,000 years, and Chinese was 5,000 years. Laopu Gold is all traditional craftsmanship and all forbidden city motifs. So they're going crazy for that. And that craftsmanship is next level from Western craftsmanship. Honestly,
Do you know what, I'm reminded of what Nachi said, your friend Nachi. She said she's Japanese, and she said to me, Japanese, we're craftspeople. Chinese, they're sales people. And I think that I would build on it. They're salespeople and they're engineers. They're salespeople and they're engineers, and they do infrastructure well. I do wonder whether you can't, comparative advantage, you can't do everything.
No. In one generation, Chinese jumped from being like Russians, bling, 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 logo, to quiet luxury in one generation. And that is the taste, their taste adoption, the taste refinement has been insane. If you look at their homegrown brands, they're better than Van Cleef. 23% down, Laopu Gold 3 times up.
So my question for you, Anna, is, so I get the craft part, but let's assume that the craft part can be mastered. In other words, what you just said is the Chinese do craft really well, despite what the Japanese say. And then what you're falling into is the lifestyle part of the brand, or the aspirational part of the brand,
yes,
which for many years represented, a French tasteful view on the world or an Italian view on the world. And that was luxury. And even the Americans never really got that, because luxury brands are in America, there's outside of Tiffany's and a couple of others, there's not many of them, or that are truly great in the way that the French brands are. And so, but when your country and your culture is isolated from Western culture, don't you have to start to incubate the kind of storytelling side of the luxury brand that's native to your culture and not imported from France?
Absolutely. And that's the difference between something that's well made and something that's well advertised. And Chinese figured out that difference. So they're like, oh, I'm paying a premium for something that's really well advertised to me. And now I kind of figured it out. There is, first of all, a rise of nationalism in China. So they're all like, no, we want to support our homegrown brands. Second of all, they're educated consumers now. They're like, oh, this quality is actually Hermes quality. Why am I paying for Hermes story when I have a better story in a forbidden city from 5,000 years ago about Chinese craftsmanship. So combine those two trends, quality, because before, literally, when I was growing up, made in China meant Reebok with one E. When, like that's what you thought to buy. That was like something that's a lot now.
Reebok has
like,
one E.
No, he has two E's.
Hey, you're right. That would be Reebok.
Yeah, look it up.
It's
does it?
R-E-E.
No.
Yeah. Oh, you
I don't know
always
how to
such an
spell
easy
Reebok.
target, Brian.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Well, that's the point. So there is like motivation. It's like kind of like, no, this is the quality is the same. And further, I really like this national motive. I really like these symbols of Chinese history. I do want to wear them because that's my status signaling here.
This is like why this is such an important topic. Because when your aspiration ceases being something that's a product of Western culture and becomes part of your own culture, you have a powerful country.
1,000%.
It's a very important topic.
It's unbelievably important topic. So, Troy, I would just add, they need to crack the code of pop culture. They almost got there with Labubu. Almost. Because Labubu was pop marts. It went down. It's gone. And they just don't have the pop culture exports. Once they figure that out, that's it. They're done.
Yeah, I always wonder about that when I'm in Italy because it exhibits none of the cultural tension that's omnipresent in America, which is really where all the good cultural product comes from. Like, what the actual fuck is going on with Italian music? I said this last week and Brian defended it, but their taste is terrible in music. Their native kind of pop scene or hip hop scene or whatever is ridiculous. And they still consume Italian retreads of American 70s classics. Like, what is going on?
It's Eurovision, baby. It's like, what's the name?
Eurovision. Oh my God.
That's like,
Alex's.
yes, they're stuck in 80s. They're stuck in 80s, nothing else. Like, you know what I mean? That's kind of like, that's what happened. And now it's all
It's a sensitive topic for Alex. Should we do, this has been great, but let's get into good product. I think it's time for it.
Well, I got one, and actually it's great to have, someone who's like on around to maybe comment on it, but it struck me a moment ago, actually, because my loving wife had made some hard-boiled eggs, and I can only eat them now with Tabasco sauce. And Tabasco has become so important to me that I almost am that guy that like brings it to restaurants.
It's such a 70s, 80s condiment brand, but go on. It's like A1.
Avery Island.
But it's
You ever
also
been there?
very refined palette. It's very like nouveau riche behavior.
Did you
I
have
like
Tabasco in Yugoslavia? Did it exist? Did you
No,
have your
he did
own?
not. No, not Tabasco.
You guys,
No, just mayo, not even ketchup, mustard and mayo. I don't like ketchup.
talk about
every day.
a great brand. Has never changed. Has 3 fucking ingredients, right?
it.
It's got
Wow.
vinegar, chilies, and salt. That's it. And they haven't like taken the brand
It's a
and
legacy brand.
bastardized it.
It's a legacy.
The family still owns it. It's made in the same place. And my family gets into these arguments with me. They're like, no, it's not as good as Frank's or Cholula's.
Frank's Red Hot, Crystal even.
Cholula, that sucks, that stuff. I don't want garlic in my hot sauce. Okay, that's not what I'm looking for. And Tabasco just kind of, to me, is a reliable friend. And I want it in my purse, my man purse.
Yeah. Well, it is a nice, like, hearkening back to a simpler time, because I look at like the 1970s and 80s, like the big four of condiments were Tabasco sauce, Heinz 57, A1, and I think for the sort of status symbol condiment of the time was Grey Poupon.
Yes. That was a status condiment.
That was.
What about Dijon?
This is what like you did not get in Yugo. Like
No,
because
we did. We got
know,
like one of everything and none of Tabasco sauce. There you go.
there was this great commercial in the 1980s for Grey Poupon. Do you remember that one, Troy? Did you get that in Canada? Where like the
100%.
guy was
Yeah,
in a
no, we got
Bentley
that.
and like he was like, "Excuse me, sir, may I borrow?" There were always British rich people back then. May I borrow your Grey Poupon? So good for.
Well,
I like
my
Tabasco.
product, like, look, Miu Miu opened a jazz club in Japan, and I love how those brands,
Different, similar but
Well,
different. Go on.
like totally similar to Poupon, and I got it done in 1 minute, is basically that, like, if you want to go back to the beginning of this conversation or experiences and so on, You mean, oh, why Japan? Why jazz? Jazz has connoisseurs. They have extremely evolved and discerning jazz club culture in Japan. Of course, they're going to open there. What an amazing brand experience, brand opportunity. It doesn't really even matter if you buy a Miu Miu bag, but if you do have it, you feel more self-actualized. So it's almost like having an Aristotle with you.
That is going to be the new status symbol. I mean, you know, having your philosopher, I mean, I think just like showing up somewhere and being like, instead of your like multiple assistants, be like, this is my philosopher.
That's cool.
Hey, I think
Better than
there's so
Butler.
many of them on the market. Like,
I would love it.
You know, I have a bonus culture corner one. I can't get enough, you know, when I get these sort of one hits in my head, I can't get enough of them. I play them repeatedly. And there's something I love about Jack Antonoff. And he's kind of like this New Jersey Jewish kid, and he's awkward. And then he struck riches by being the producer to all those famed musicians like Taylor Swift. And then he wasn't he briefly with
Lena Dunham.
Lena Dunham, and then he married Margaret Qualley.
Yes.
And there's this new song, You and Forever, by the Bleachers. That's Jack's band. And it's this kind of reminds me of like synth pop from the 80s meets like Arcade Fire. And I love this song. I love this song, Brian.
Okay.
They don't play this song in Italy.
Hey,
I played
Troy,
it.
there's
I put it in my family chat.
Gap and, you know, like monetize it. Open a club with amazing music in Milan
In Italy.
during fashion. The world is yours.
Interestingly, like Jack Anton, thank you, Anna. Thank you for the drop by.
Bye. I love seeing you. Thank you.
Love seeing you too.
Bye.
Bye.
You know, Jack Antonoff had said this version of modernity is trash. So maybe the reaction, just to bring it full circle, is happening.
He says, what I think pop music will become way more organic, and anything that is very algorithmic will probably get swallowed by AI. Honestly, as it should. What survives will be a more direct expression of hearing or feeling someone in the room. People are screaming. This is the line. People are screaming and crying for that because they can't take another second of their humanity being reduced to something getting their attention.
No, and I think that actually is a good note to end on, because, you know, these are the big questions that we wrestle with here on the prophetically named people versus algorithms.
Who knew?
You knew, Troy, you knew what we were heading into, and it is the tension of our time.
Tune in next week, folks.
And so it goes. Thank you.
Yeah. All right,
Bye.
That's it for this episode of People vs. Algorithms, where each week we uncover patterns shaping media, culture, and technology. Big thanks, as always, to our producer, Vanya Arsenov. She always makes us a little clearer and more understandable, and we appreciate her very, very much. If you're enjoying these conversations, we'd love for you to leave us a review. It helps us get the word out and keeps our community growing. Remember, you can find People vs. Algorithms on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, and now on YouTube. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again next week.